The Roman army's most devastating battle victory. Picture this: 50,000 Roman soldiers surrounded on 150,000 enemy warriors with no escape, food running out, two separate armies closing in from opposite directions. Any sane commander would surrender. But Julius Caesar wasn't sane, he was a genius. What happened next at the Battle of Alesia in 52 BC wasn't just a victory. It was a masterclass in military engineering, so devastating that it ended an entire civilization's hope for freedom and gave birth to the Roman Empire. Welcome to Chapters in History. Today we're breaking down the most tactically brilliant and brutally decisive victory in Roman military history. Hit subscribe because this battle changed the course of Western civilization. Let's witness the impossible. The Battle of Alesia wasn't supposed to be possible. Julius Caesar and his legions were trapped, outnumbered 5-1, fighting a two-front war against the greatest Gallic leader who ever lived. The laws of military strategy said Caesar should have been annihilated. Instead, he orchestrated a victory so complete that it broke the Gallic coalition forever. But what makes Alesia truly devastating wasn't just the tactical brilliance, it was the totality of the destruction. When the battle ended, Gallic independence was finished. An entire culture's military power was shattered in a single engagement. The leader who had united dozens of tribes in rebellion was captured and would be executed in Rome 6 years later. Alesia represents Roman military capability at its absolute peak. It combined innovative engineering, tactical flexibility, psychological warfare, and sheer determination into a victory that military strategists still study 2,000 years later. To understand how Caesar achieved the impossible, we need to go back to the beginning of the campaign and witness how Rome's greatest general turned disaster into legendary triumph. Chapter 1: The Gallic Revolt. By 52 BC, Julius Caesar had spent 6 years conquering Gaul through a combination of military genius and political manipulation. He had defeated tribe after tribe, playing them against each other, winning some as allies while crushing others. It seemed like Gaul would soon be just another Roman province. Then everything changed. A young Gallic nobleman named Vercingetorix did something unprecedented. He united the tribes. He convinced Celtic chieftains who had been enemies for generations that Rome was the real threat. For the first time, Gauls weren't fighting each other. They were fighting Rome. Vercingetorix was brilliant. He adopted scorched earth tactics, burning Gallic villages and crops to deny Roman supplies. He avoided pitched battles where Roman discipline gave them the advantage. He hit supply columns, ambushed isolated units, and harassed Caesar's army relentlessly. Caesar was losing. His army was starving, his allies were defecting, and Gallic forces were growing stronger. He needed a decisive victory, but Vercingetorix refused to give him one. Then Caesar got lucky. Vercingetorix made his only major mistake of the campaign. After a successful cavalry skirmish, he retreated to the hilltop fortress of Alesia with his entire army, approximately 80,000 warriors. He believed the fortified position and the massive relief army being assembled would trap Caesar between two forces and destroy him. Caesar saw something different. He saw an opportunity to turn a siege into the decisive battle that would end the war. What he built at Alesia would be one of history's most audacious military engineering projects. Chapter 2: The Circumvallation. Caesar's plan was insane. He would surround Alesia with fortifications to trap Vercingetorix inside, then build a second ring of fortifications facing outward to protect against the relief army. He would fight a siege and a field battle simultaneously, defending against attacks from both directions. The construction project was staggering. Caesar ordered his 50,000 soldiers to build what he called the Circumvallation, an 11-mile wall completely encircling the hilltop fortress of Alesia. But this wasn't just a wall. It was a comprehensive defensive system that would make modern military engineers gasp. First came a trench 20 feet wide filled with water diverted from nearby rivers, creating an impassable moat. Behind that, 2 more trenches, each 15 feet wide and 15 feet deep, creating kill zones. Behind the trenches, a rampart topped with a wooden palisade 12 feet high, with sharpened stakes protruding outward. Every 80 feet along the wall stood a wooden tower, giving Roman archers and artillery crews overlapping fields of fire. The towers housed scorpions, bolt-firing artillery that could punch through shields and men with terrifying accuracy. But Caesar wasn't finished. He ordered his engineers to create death traps in the ground before the walls. They dug pits 5 feet deep in checkerboard patterns, each containing a sharpened stake at the bottom, then covered them with brush to hide them. Gallic cavalry would charge across what looked like flat ground, and suddenly horses and riders would be impaled or trapped. They also hammered sharpened iron spikes into the ground at angles, creating fields of caltrops that would shred feet and horse hooves. Every approach to the Roman walls became a nightmare of hidden death. The entire circumvallation, 11 miles of complex fortifications with trenches, walls, towers, and traps, was built in less than 3 weeks. Roman soldiers worked in shifts day and night, while simultaneously guarding against sorties from Alesia and foraging for food. Chapter 3. The Contravallation. Then, Caesar learned that a massive Gallic relief army was approaching. Reports suggested between 250,000 and 300,000 warriors were marching to save Vercingetorix. Caesar was about to be trapped between 2 enemy forces in hostile territory, with no reinforcements available. His response? Build another wall. Caesar ordered construction of the Contravallation, an outer ring of fortifications, 14 miles in circumference, facing outward. The Romans would defend 2 separate 360-degree perimeters simultaneously. The Contravallation used the same design as the inner wall: trenches, ramparts, towers, traps, and obstacles. In just days, Caesar's legions built a second complete fortress system. They were now inside a double-walled fortification, besieging Alesia while preparing to be besieged themselves. Think about the logistics. Caesar's army needed to man both walls continuously. They needed to maintain supplies for over 50,000 men, while surrounded by enemies and cut off from their supply base. They needed to keep morale high despite being outnumbered and trapped. And they needed to be ready to fight desperate battles on both fronts simultaneously. The psychological pressure was immense. Roman soldiers could see Gallic forces gathering beyond their outer walls, an army that dwarfed their own forces. They could hear war drums and horns day and night. They knew that when the attack came, there would be no retreat, no reinforcements, no escape, victory, or death. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix faced his own crisis. Food was running out. He had ordered all the women, children, and elderly out of the fortress to conserve supplies, but Caesar refused to let them through his lines. These civilians were trapped in no man's land between the walls, starving slowly while both armies watched. Chapter 4. The battle begins. The relief army arrived in late September. Ancient sources describe a force so large it covered the plains around Alesia. Warriors from dozens of Gallic tribes had answered Vercingetorix's call. They believed their numbers would overwhelm the Romans through sheer mass. The first assault came at noon. Gallic forces attacked the Contravallation from all sides simultaneously, trying to find weak points. They brought siege equipment, mantlets for protection, and grappling hooks to pull down the Roman palisades. The attack was chaos. Thousands of Gallic warriors charged across open ground toward the Roman walls. The first ranks hit the hidden traps. Men disappeared into camouflaged pits, impaled on stakes. Others stepped on iron caltrops, the spikes punching through feet. The charge faltered before it reached the trenches. Roman artillery opened fire. Scorpions launched iron bolts that could skewer 2 or 3 men in a single shot. Ballistae hurled stones that shattered shields and crushed skulls. Archers on the towers fired down into the packed mass of attackers. The Gauls who reached the trenches found them impossible to cross quickly. As they tried to fill them or bridge them, Roman soldiers on the ramparts above threw javelins and heavy stones. The trapped Gauls became targets in a shooting gallery. But there were so many attackers that some sections of wall came under extreme pressure. Romans had to rush reserves to threatened points, fighting desperately to prevent breakthroughs. The battle raged for hours, until the Gauls finally withdrew, leaving thousands of dead and wounded in front of the Roman fortifications. That same day, Vercingetorix launched a sortie from Alesia, attacking the inner wall. Caesar's forces now fought on both sides simultaneously. Roman soldiers ran from one wall to the other, plugging gaps and reinforcing weak points. Caesar himself rode along the walls, his scarlet cloak visible to all, directing reserves and rallying tired troops. The first day's fighting ended with Roman positions holding, but barely. The Gauls had learned that frontal assaults were suicide. They would need a better strategy. Chapter 5. The Decisive Assault. 2 days later, the Gauls made their move. They had scouted the Roman fortifications and found what they thought was the weak point, a section of the CONTRAVALLATION on a hill called Mount Rhea, where the ground made it impossible to build the full defensive system. At midnight, 60,000 picked Gallic warriors moved silently into position. At dawn, they attacked Mount Rhea, while the relief army hit the walls from all other directions, and Vercingetorix launched a massive sortie from Alesia. The Romans were fighting on 3 fronts with no reserves left. The assault on Mount Rhea was devastating. The Gauls brought everything: siege towers, ladders, grappling hooks, and sheer numbers. They broke through the first line of defenses and began overwhelming Roman positions. If they breached the wall here, they could roll up the entire Roman position from inside. Caesar rushed to Mount Rhea with his last reserves, his Germanic cavalry, about 6,000 riders who had remained loyal. But even as he led these troops toward the crisis point, another section of war was on the verge of collapse. The Gauls were minutes away from victory. This was the moment that defined Caesar as a military genius. He made a split-second decision. Instead of defending, he attacked. Caesar personally led his